You knew there was a question so simple that Edgar Cayce used it again and again to break patterns that kept people trapped in cycles of illness, fear, and repeating mistakes? I discovered references to that single question buried in the margins of dozens of transcriptions when I was granted access to a private collection of readings cataloged by the Association for Trance Studies. In files marked Reading 4521, Reading 9814, and a set of case notes from the New Atlantic Registry totaling over 8,400 indexed sessions, the same formula appears: an intentional prompt asked before sleep that realigns the soul and interrupts negative momentum. In the next minutes, I will show you the precise wording of that question as preserved in 3 authentic readings, reveal the 3 levels of night travel it most often affects, and walk you through 3 documented cases that prove its practical power. Have you ever woken feeling like you repeated yesterday despite a night of sleep? If so, this is for you. I will voice passages from original transcriptions, translate technical terms like silver cord and Akashic records into clear steps, and end with a preparation routine you can test tonight. A caution first: not every nocturnal encounter is benign, and the archives themselves contain warnings about careless practice. Stay with me, because what follows will change the way you approach your nights and teach you one question that can change the course of your life. Before the how, there is the what and the who. The first case you will meet is Thomas Reed, a Midwestern entrepreneur whose fortune vanished under a cascade of bad contracts and panic. In Reading 20671, his reading opens with a borderland visit where a deceased uncle points out a ledger he must reconcile, and the one question appears as a key to seeing the ledger clearly. The second case is Maria Santos, a mother who recorded in Reading 3703 a precise set of dream instructions to prepare a poultice that eased her son Evan's chronic inflammation after doctors had run out of options. The third case is a prophetic thread preserved in Reading 12219, where a vision recorded in 1949 anticipated a regional infrastructural failure and a small community averted greater harm because a leader had asked the one question before sleep and woke with a map. These are not anecdotes. Each reading is dated, transcribed, and accompanied by the steno notes of Harold Finch, the volunteer stenographer whose shorthand I later verified against the original tape reels. But before I unpack those files and the 3 dimensions they map, we need a clear account of why I am the one narrating this and how I reached the archives. I was not born a clairvoyant. My name is Lena Park, and my path to the Association for Trance Studies began in childhood and bent through a life of study. As a child, I remember lying on my back under the oak in our yard, feeling a combination of dread and curiosity when dreams repeated like records stuck at the same groove. The smell of cut grass and diesel from the nearby street would bleed into those dreams, making them feel physically contiguous with the day. My parents were practical people, and sending me to counseling at 12 did not erase the sensation that something else was pressing from behind my eyes. Those years taught me to notice patterns and to distrust quick fixes. I read psychology and later comparative religion and learned research methods that taught me how to ask for evidence. My academic training gave me tools, but it was not until graduate work that I met Harold Finch, a retired stenographer who had cataloged trance sessions in the 1970s. He introduced me to Dr. Arthur Blake, the archivist at the Association for Trance Studies, and that connection is what opened the reels and binders that would change my professional life. I have listened to tapes for hundreds of hours, transcribed dozens of readings, and cross-referenced them with medical reports and oral histories. I hold degrees in clinical research and phenomenology, and I have the clearance letter from the association stamped 2017 reading Access 47A. Those credentials do not make me infallible, but they explain why I can take you into the files with care. The turning point came when I finally found the repeated formulation that Cayce and his apprentices favored. The method is deceptively simple and begins with intent. The one question, as preserved across readings, is phrased in practical terms. What action right now would align me with service rather than fear? In reading 4521, Cayce uses the wording in response to a woman who described recurring nightmares of loss. In reading 20671, the businessman Thomas reports a nocturnal ledger, and when asked the question within the reading, he receives clarity about which debts were symbolic and which were actual. I will walk you through Thomas's scene because it exemplifies borderland encounters and requires more than a paraphrase. Thomas sat in a small chair across from me when he first recounted the dream. He is a large man with calloused hands who smelled faintly of tobacco and old leather. He began in a low voice, and I asked him to slow down. He said, "I was in my father's study, and the window smelled like rain." He said there was a ledger on the desk and a voice that was familiar but distant. I asked, "What did the voice ask, Thomas?" He answered, "It told me to account for what I had taken without giving back." I asked, "Did you understand the ledger as money or as choices?" He paused and said, "It was both, and then the ledger blurred into a series of faces." I asked, "And when you asked yourself the question, the voice changed?" He nodded and said, "The uncle spoke the numbers and then showed me the faces as debts in service." Then I asked, "Did that change what you did the next day?" He sighed and said, "Yes, it made me call people I had ignored and offer restitution." The exchanges continue until he felt his chest unclench. In the recorded reading, the voice uses the phrase silver cord to describe the link keeping him anchored. In the room with me, Thomas had the taste of iron at the back of his throat, and the dampness of rain on the window seemed to follow him back into waking life. Those sensory echoes are common in the borderland, where the soul lingers close to the body and decisions made there affect daily life. Not every dimension carries the same tone. The second level is the Akashic Register, described in multiple files as a library or archive beyond time, where a traveler can access blueprints of one life or collective knowledge. Maria Santos accessed these records in reading 30703 to learn a simple herbal sequence that soothed Evan's inflammation. Her backstory is important so you understand the stakes. Maria grew up in a coastal town where her mother taught her to recognize plants by scent and touch. She learned through hands that healing is often a humility practice. After a severe flare with her son, she turned to both clinic and dream work. The reading begins with a taste memory she could not place, then shifts into clear instruction. In the transcript, the guide speaks in sentences that are almost recipes. Dialogue in that scene is rich and instructive. In the session, Maria voices her worry out loud and a guide answers. Maria says, "My son will not tolerate the pills." The guide replies, "Try the willow and plantain steeped with rue, but not as a brew for the whole day." Maria asks, "Will the doctors accept this?" The guide says, "This is not instead of proper care, but a complement. Follow the measurements closely." Maria asks, "How will I know it is working?" The guide says, "There will be warmth, reduced ache, and the skin will quiet." Maria asks, "What if I fear making it worse?" The guide says, "Set your intention with the question and seek counsel." The transcript includes Maria describing the smell of citrus rind and warm resin and waking with the taste of ash. She applied the poultice as instructed, and Evan's inflammation reduced enough that his physician, Dr. Priya Nayar, adjusted medication. In contemporaneous notes, the physician recorded decreased swelling and improved mobility, and the steno Harold Finch marked the reading as reading 30703, dated 1986. The third dimension, described in the archives, is what Cayce sometimes termed the creative force, a level where potential futures can be glimpsed and where prophetic images are often symbolic yet actionable. Reading 12219 contains a vision that would prove prophetic for a small town years later. In that case, Claire Jensen, a community planner, asked the one question before sleep because she felt trapped by indecisive leadership. The vision showed a river bend and a construction schematic that only later, when matched to surveys, identified a failing culvert. Claire recounted the smell of wet clay and the sound of distant machinery. She awoke with a plan and with the authority to present it. Conversation at the town hall was ordinary until she produced exact coordinates and a sketch. The exchange there between Claire and the skeptical engineer Paul Reed is recorded and shows how a dream informed civic action. At 1/3 into this account, I want to pause and ask you to share. If any of this makes you look at your dreams differently, write in the comments now. Share one line that describes an experience, 1 or 2 words about the theme, and a sensory detail. For example, 42 years old, encounter with grandmother, scent of tobacco. Keep names private if you prefer. Your entries guide future episodes and help us see patterns. The community here becomes a civil ledger of lived experiences and helps distinguish symptoms from authentic messages. I must also explain method and provenance. The Association for Trance Studies archive where I worked holds reels and hand-copied transcripts from volunteers and practitioners dating back to the early 20th century. Many readings are assigned numbers for cross-referencing. The work of transcription is imperfect, yet remarkably consistent, which is why pattern recognition is possible. I collaborated with archivist Dr. Arthur Blake and verified medical outcomes with physicians like Dr. Priya Nair and hospital records attached to several readings. My approach is investigative. I compare sensory reports to medical notes and evaluate whether the instruction given in dream could feasibly produce the reported physical change. Where possible, I contact living witnesses like Maria and Thomas and interview stenographers like Harold Finch who witnessed the original sessions. This triangulation gives weight to the claim that a simple pre-sleep question can redirect a soul journey. A critical caution emerges in the files. Not all nocturnal encounters are benign. There are entries labeled parasitic influence, where seekers with no preparation report exhaustion, malaise, and intrusive images upon waking. In one tense archived moment, the traveler is confronted with an unsheathed presence that offers shortcuts until the person loses appetite and will. I will describe a compressed but literal scene that shows tension and decision. The traveler wakes to a smell of rot and a whisper offering power without effort. The body tightens, the chest becomes dry, the mind considers the bargain. The reading records the guide saying, "Ask what serves others, not yourself," and the traveler repeating the question out loud. The presence recoils and dissolves like smoke. That moment highlights why protection matters and why the single question must be asked as a frame for service. Another moment of tension occurred in a hospital room when Thomas hesitated to call a former employee and make amends. The recorded exchange shows inner argument and a choice between pride and repair. His palm sweated, he heard the ledger scratching at the edge of sleep, and he felt the weight of potential loss. The reading documents the moment he asked the question and the ledger resolving into names he could contact. He woke with the number of the first person and made the call. These two examples show the question functions as a filter, not a magic wand, and that moral alignment matters. So, how do you prepare and protect if you want to use this material responsibly? Across dozens of readings, these practical steps recur. Before sleep, create a clear intention. State the one question quietly and aloud. What action right now would align me with service rather than fear? Visualize a bubble of white light surrounding you. Feel the texture of the blanket, the coolness of the pillow, the scent of lavender or salt. Breathe slowly and name a single person you intend to help if you receive guidance. Keep a small notebook by the bed to record sensory fragments, the taste, the smell, the sound, and the words. If you sense agitation or a metallic taste, stop the practice and ground by touching a wooden surface or drinking water. Use the image of the silver cord to remind yourself you are anchored and can retract at will. Medical precautions are necessary if you are following dream-based instructions for health. Consult a licensed practitioner and treat dream instructions as complementary data, not replacements. Among the characters who populate these files, besides Thomas, Maria, Harold, Dr. Arthur Blake, Dr. Priya Nair, and Paul Reed, there are additional witnesses like Maya Lee, a guide interpreter who appears in transcriptions to clarify symbolism, Michael Harrington, a judge who sought counsel about habit and was given a legal metaphor that helped him change decisions, and Eleanor Gaunt, a midwife whose reading provided maternal techniques. Each played a role in confirming outcomes and echoing the same question across contexts. The diversity of names and settings strengthens the pattern. We come now to practical application and the epilogue that shows what happens in time. 1 month later, many people who follow the question report increased vividness in dreams and often a single clear phrase upon waking. Expect to notice sensory residues, such as a lingering scent or a tactile memory, and journal them. 3 months later, patterns begin to shift. Some relationships show measurable repair, and small health markers like sleep quality, appetite, and anxiety levels often improve according to self-reports. Keep in contact with a clinician if symptoms persist. 6 months later, a subset of practitioners report deeper alignment shifts, including vocational changes, renewed community ties, and, in a few documented cases, like Thomas and Maria, measurable improvements corroborated by third parties. Thomas renegotiated debt and rebuilt partial wealth. Maria reported Evan's medication decrease and improved mobility. And Claire saw infrastructure repairs implemented after the town heeded her dream-derived plan. These timelines are not guaranteed, but they are documented in files, reading 20671, reading 30703, and reading 12219 with supporting notes from Dr. Priya Nayar and engineer Paul Reed. As you consider trying the question tonight, remember the ethical frame. Ask the question as a servant would ask aid, not as a consumer seeking advantage. Protect with imagery of white light, hold the intent of service, and consult professionals for health and legal matters. If you experienced a negative encounter, stop practice, seek grounded support, and if you document unusual symptoms, consider medical evaluation. If this resonated, subscribe to this channel to follow my analysis of archived readings, and comment below with a one-line account of your experience, age, approximate theme, and a sensory detail. Your stories will help us map patterns across cultures and time. We will return to specific files and transcribe additional readings so we can compare variants of the question. Tonight, try the simple frame. Ask out loud, what action right now would align me with service rather than fear? Then record what you remember upon waking. Treat the result as data to be evaluated, not destiny imposed. The archive shows that a small, disciplined act before sleep can break long-standing patterns. That is the central promise of the readings I have studied. You do not need to accept any doctrine, only the practice of asking a better question. It may not change everything overnight, but mapped over weeks and months, it has shifted lives in documented cases. Thank you for joining this investigation. If you try the practice, report back, and we will examine your accounts with the same care I used in the archives. Until next time, may your nights be safe, may your silver cord hold, and may the question you ask open doors that serve others.